I got to be honest, man. I had every bit of my metaphorical money on the fact that we would get a starter named after the first preseason game.
Yeah.
We just got the Schefter bomb. Kyler is officially the Vikings starting quarterback. I think we saw this coming the whole time, but there's a little noise after the night practices about his performance. You have your QB1, Ben. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm surprised, honestly. I thought that they would wait a little longer. I mean, we all know that the earlier the better in naming your starting quarterback. Um, and I think we all knew that this was not a true 50-50 quarterback competition. I mean, they weren't going to bring Kyler Murray in and he was going to lose this quarterback competition. He wasn't going to start against the Packers. We knew that was going to happen. It was just a matter of timing of when it was going to happen. And I am a little shocked. I'm shocked that it happened now. I thought that they would at least push these guys because it benefits both of them to carry on this competition and push them in a way that they're uncomfortable, in a way that, they can maybe, elevate their own ceiling into the first or second preseason game. So I think we all know it was inevitable, but I'm shocked at the timing.
Well, and a lot of what you're hearing is reps. I mean, this
Yeah.
feels like a reps decision. Uh,
Yeah.
but for that reason, that's why I thought it would go. The most important reps in the preseason are joint practices. I thought we'd get a decision before then. I thought it would go through the first game. So here's the important question:
Mm.
how long is the leash? We've all talked about what it takes to win. Is it a
Mm-hmm.
real competition? But now we're here and we have a winner. How long is the leash?
I think it's pretty long. I mean, outside of him just having disastrous games, and him looking like he just can't pick up the offense, which is contrary to what all the reports are, even from Kevin O'Connell himself. I mean, it sounds like he's very happy with where he's at with the playbook. So I don't see that happening. So outside of absolute mental disaster, I think he's got a really long leash. And again, the caveat is staying healthy. But as far as them actually voluntarily pulling him, I just don't see that happening. I think they're going to let him ride it out as long as possible. So that's that will be I think less of a talker as the season goes along.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about the pressure that I hear you, but that the winner faces because there's another guy that a lot of people wanted, uh,
Mm-hmm.
potentially in the locker room, another guy that some people wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a big year for both these guys. Like if Kyler goes out and has a disaster, there's a lot of money on the line for that dude.
Yeah.
And if he can't make it work here, that shades the rest of his career. If JJ McCarthy would have gotten another shot and it's a disaster, you might be looking at career second, third stringer type stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't really talk a lot about the ramifications of once you get the job. And that's because, we don't focus on what could go wrong. You want to focus on what could go right. My other question before I get to my main McCarthy question is you and I have talked about this a million times. I'm always peppering you about it, but it's because I heard back in when Favre arrived, I remember hearing not a lot, but there were guys in the locker room who going into that Niners game were still like, "Are you sure it shouldn't be Tavares?" Like genuinely.
Yeah.
And then that
Yeah. I don't know. But
you
yes, I know what you're
you
saying.
and I you and I know at least a couple guys. We know at least a couple of I'm not saying it was mass. So my point is how like the locker room split, do you think one exists and do you think what do you think if one exists it will take to coalesce around the guy, or do you think since the moment Kyler's walked in a lot of people have gone that's him?
Well, I mean, I think the reality is, I mean, even going back to Favre, I mean, there was a couple voices. I think that they just personally didn't like Brett Favre, but I mean, how could you not want his talent, his skill level, even at that age versus what Tavares was giving us? So yeah, I know going back to that '09 season, there were a couple voices, but I think it was more of a personal thing than it was a professional thing. Um, in this instance, I think that's a real conversation that the Vikings are going to have is how do we how do we mitigate the dissension, potential dissension within the locker room of guys that have built up a personal and a professional relationship with McCarthy in the 3 years that he's been here. And then not to say that they don't like Kyler Murray, but it's just, who's your leader?
Mhm.
Which one are where is your alliance going to go towards? And I know professionally it's very easy on the outside to be like, look, this is the starting quarterback. You listen to him, you respect his kind of position, and you ride with him. But personal feelings really get in the way. And I think the one thing that McCarthy's done on a really, really well in a natural way, and we've talked about it here on this channel, is that um, how much the guys just innately like him. He has a magnetic personality. He has that intangible it factor where guys just sort of like him. Um, where does that energy go knowing that he's going to be now the backup quarterback, or at least for now he's a backup quarterback, but like what is he going to be? He's not the starting quarterback. And where does your alliance fit with Kyler Murray? That's a really interesting scenario. And we all talk about locker room dynamics and team chemistry. And right now, you better figure that out since you named the starting quarterback so early.
So let me hammer down on the Favre thing here and relate it
Mm-hmm.
to, so in '08, the year before Favre arrives, were you sitting there thinking, we got it. We need somebody to throw the ball, but we got it. Was that a genuine
Mm-hmm.
feeling you and teammates you were close with had?
Yes, it was because back in '08, we heard that he wanted out of Green Bay and wanted
Mm.
specifically come to join Darrell Bevel and the Minnesota Vikings. And that was a conversation happening during training camp. And we obviously the Packers were like, we're not going to ship you over to the Vikings. Like we're not insane.
Yeah,
So they all know that everybody knew that going to the Jets was like a little bit of like, hey,
the
here's a little bit of
detour.
purgatory. Yeah, you're gonna go over here for a year so we can detach ourselves from sending you to a division rival.
Well, I ask you that because I'm curious if you had to make your best guess. When guys on this team are sitting, when Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw are eating sandwiches together, when
Mm-hmm.
JJ and Addison are walking into the facility, when dudes are hanging out, do
Mm-hmm.
you think they looked at last year? Do they look at this group and go, we just need a guy who can throw the ball? Because on the outside, with the success of the other teams in the division and the lack of, like, at that point, we all knew Jared Allen was going to be a Hall of Famer already, right? We knew Kevin Williams should be a Hall of Famer. He should be someday, but we
Yes,
knew
he
he
should
was
be.
on that path. And you saw the weapons all over. And I think those names, especially on defense, aren't really weird, but it was a top five defense. There are all these weapons. What do you think those guys are thinking? Do you think there's a true confidence that they're a thrower away? Or is it, we need to get one of these guys and we need to build to being a real contender in a year or two?
Look, players are fans too, and players obviously have a deeper understanding of how the team is playing, how individual units are playing, how individuals themselves are playing. We're childish little bratty housewives inside that locker room too,
Sure.
So I guarantee you all of those guys see all the same things that the fans do and they talk about it. We would sit on a bus coming back from an away game and we're like whispering in the back of the bus, like, this guy played like shit, blah 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 blah, blah. Like, like, what are we gonna do here? Like, hey, we're just one guy away. So I do think in this situation, they looked at the record last year. They know what the record was. They know how close they were to be a playoff team and how competitive they were. And they didn't have a quarterback last year. They didn't have quality quarterback play. They didn't have playoff caliber quarterback play. They knew that. So I think a lot of them, from a professional standpoint, realize that bringing a guy like Kyler Murray in sort of gives them a little extra juice, knowing that we have all the talent in the world. We can compete with anybody. We just need a more confident and competent, consistent quarterback. And I feel like most of those guys probably felt that the second that they signed Kyler. I'm sure it's I'm sure it's only been solidified and supported by just watching him play and be around the team. Not to say that he's perfect, but I think that they feel like there has been an upgrade made there.
Again, it's a lot of pressure. That's
Mm-hmm.
you got a lot of big time veteran names in this league. That's a lot of pressure. Uh, but it makes sense for some of these guys. Four starters in the last 4 years. You know, if you're a Christian Darrisaw, if you're a Justin Jefferson, even an Addison, a Hawkinson, you know, if you're one of these elite players, veterans on this team, you've watched four guys throw the ball in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, like, I mean, you've watched way more than that. Let's be clear. What I'm saying is four different week one starters in the last 4 years:
Yeah.
Cousins
Yeah.
to Darnold to McCarthy to now Murray. Uh, well, let's shift to the guy who didn't get the job because I think I got more now what with him. You know, I think there's a lot of people who assume, does JJ ask out? Do the Vikings want to move on from him? Is
Mm-hmm.
this a good environment for him to continue to grow? Which I think if you're a fan of the team, that's, you know, what you want. But
Mm-hmm.
he lost out on the competition. How do you respond to that? And what do you think is next for JJ?
I think that, I mean, that ultimately comes the next biggest question with this team, is kind of what happens behind the scenes. And I mentioned team chemistry a moment ago and how important that is, and dynamics in the locker room. And then you threw out the word health, and what is healthiest for this team? And that's a huge question for new GM Nolan Teasley to answer. And maybe he's the perfect guy to make such a hard decision because he's fresh. He has no attachment to JJ McCarthy. The organization themselves and the whole front office can say, look, we got a new guy at the helm. He's calling the shots. There's no attachment here. He's looking out for the health of this football team. So I'm under the belief that I don't think that JJ is going to request a trade. I don't think that he's going to look at this and pound his fists on the ground and be a child and be like, "Oh, wow, I didn't win the starting position." I think he knew he had the cards stacked against him. So I think he's in a nutshell. I think he's going to be a good teammate. But I mean, I also see a very probable world where Nolan Teasley looks at this and says, I know this locker room is probably divided. I know there are probably some guys and probably some really high end guys in this team that believe that we made the wrong decision and they want JJ McCarthy and they have their alliances to JJ McCarthy and they're actually really, really good friends with JJ McCarthy. Um, how is that dynamic going to work out? What is that going to do to the health of this locker room? McCarthy said it himself in OTAs. He realized that this is a very tough competition, a really tough environment. And he says in the meeting room, Kyler sits over here and I sit over here. And they basically don't talk. Are you kidding me? Like, the tension in that room alone is not what you would deem a healthy situation. So you're telling me that you want to go into, you know, 18 weeks, 17 weeks of game planning and have this tension in the room where one guy's over here who's the starter and one guy's over here, even though he's not rocking the boat. It's just that he has probably the support of more than, a quarter of the team over here. So, and he's also looking at every one of your mistakes and every one of your negative plays and thinking, well, I probably wouldn't have made that decision, or I can make that throw or whatever. Who knows what happens in the course of 17 weeks? So, I think Nolan Teasley has a really important and very tough decision to make. And I think that will be the next biggest storyline that we're all going to be talking about here in the next few weeks.
I so here's where I've landed on the whole thing in its totality, more moving forward, right? Because ever since we started doing shows, and if you talk about JJ McCarthy, there is a storm of supporters, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. I think the cards were stacked. I think it was Kyler's job to lose. I also don't think it was a conspiracy. I don't think it was that way because JJ was so good but not getting the respect he deserved. I think that situation happened based upon what happened last year. But I'm not a give up on JJ guy. Like, I've liked the world that I think some of the more rational fans who exist have
Mm-hmm.
existed in. Like, if the head coach thinks that this guy is the guy with this group of veterans, if Kyler, like, that should be the first choice. Let's see what happens here. But I'm not like, ideally, you have a young asset that, I mean, Aaron Rodgers sat for 3 years. Jordan Love sat for 3 years. I know rookies play early, but this was a really young guy. And,
Hmm.
you know, maybe it does work out, maybe it doesn't. I'm just not ready to race away from it. But what I will say is I was told pretty early on from a buddy in the league outside our organization who pretty hard talked me into Kyler. And it's hard. You've been friends with me for a long time. I do
Yeah.
not get like, I'm a difficult human being. I don't get talked into stuff. But he talked me in, and his take was he believed this national and local narrative that's been running wild from the get go, that Kyler's not a fit for KOC and KOC's not a fit for Kyler. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
football guy. He was like, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the most overblown narrative of the entire offseason. He goes, maybe Kyler doesn't rise to the level of actual performance, but he goes, this fit thing, he goes, it's nonsense. He goes, I think you're betting on your organization and your head coach, just like you did with Sam Darnold. Now, Darnold had more arm talent. We saw that the moment we walked into camp, but Kyler's got a lot of talent that a lot of other people don't. So I'm in that camp that, like, I've been talked into Kyler. I'm going to be really excited about it as a Viking fan when we start, but I'm also going to be really excited about the possibility until somebody like a Nolan Teasley tells me that I shouldn't be excited and it made sense to move on. It's kind of the thing, right? Like, I was excited about the Nolan Teasley hire as much as I want JJ around. If Teasley decides to move him, I mean, that's the guy I was excited about. I can't all of a sudden be like, "You're an idiot," you know? So I'm just, I'm just a guy. I'm just a fan. So that's my babbling summary. Is I'm kind of in on this situation for both of them, and if somebody important makes a different decision, I'm gonna go with it. Until week 4, when you're getting insane texts from me mid game as I'm losing my mind, and you're like, "Dude, I got a job. Leave me alone. I have a job."
Yeah, yeah. I think the when we flush all this out and we look at the positives of everything, that this really could be, and I think it's a high probability this is a win-win-win situation. And I throw 3 wins in there because if Kyler really is the guy that we all hope that he can be, and there is this melding between KOC's system and Kyler Murray himself with this system, and there's this mutual negotiation between everybody's playing style, and it works out, which it very very much it can work out. We've seen it in his past playing with Arizona, like he can be a high-end player. um, Maybe the best win for JJ McCarthy is a fresh start, if that's where it goes. If that's where Nolan Teasley decides that it's the healthiest for all parties, healthiest for the locker room and the team, and healthiest for JJ McCarthy, they find him a new home. And we continue to use the Baker Mayfield situation, where a very young quarterback, has some like mental immaturity issues, kind of matures during the league, or in the league, and then finds the right home for himself and really becomes a high-end player. That obviously is a huge win for JJ. And then I throw the third win in there because we keep talking about Carson Wentz and how well he played last year. And I don't think that, if a guy like, if McCarthy is moved, well, you only make that movement because you're very confident in what you have as a backup quarterback in Carson Wentz. So it's a win for him as well. He solidifies himself as the number 2 quarterback. Everybody, all the Viking fans are actually pretty happy because you're like, look, if Kyler goes out there and plays his rough and tumble style that he plays, gets injured on a scramble run, well, we have a more than capable backup quarterback that's going to go in there and probably win us a bunch of games while Kyler's on the sideline. So we're not just handing the ball off, 40 times a game because our quarterback can't throw. We got a really capable number 2. So in that scenario, it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Last thing I will say to you, JJ supporters who are, I've seen over and over say, you gotta, like, you're blowing it. Like, you can't get rid of him. You're like, which I tend to be on that side. Don't, like I said, I like a young, I've been yelling about a rookie contract for 7 years. I've wanted one. But these things have a way of working themselves out. Maybe you end up being right. Maybe you end up being wrong. But the league usually figures. I know there's been these reclamation projects, but the league usually sorts out whether or not you should be in it in your position, and that will be the answer, unless you're Paul Charchian talking about Kirk Cousins.